If I had to explain this source in one sentence, I would say it like this. Trump is not just losing one ally. He is watching several parts of MAGA begin to detach at the same time. That is the real story. A lot of people still think Trump's biggest danger is the general election, or independents, or suburban voters, or Democratic turnout, or cable news scandal. That is not what this document is about. This document is about something much more immediate and much more dangerous for him. Internal coalition implosion. The source is very clear that Marjorie Taylor Greene is publicly breaking with Trump over the war in Iran and explicitly telling people to leave MAGA in favor of what she calls America first. It also shows her framing the war as a betrayal of affordability, anti-war promises, debt reduction, domestic priorities, and the populist mission itself. That alone would be serious. But what makes the source especially important is that it does not stop with Greene. It shows multiple subcultures of the right beginning to break in parallel. That is what I want to focus on, because one defection is manageable. A synchronized unraveling across different tribes is much harder to stop. Let us look at the tribes one by one. First, the Greene tribe. This is the pure betrayal frame. Trump promised America first. Trump gave them war. Trump promised lower costs. Trump gave them gas spikes. Trump promised domestic focus. Trump gave them foreign escalation. Trump promised populist governing power. Trump gave them speeches about bombs instead of jobs, debt, Social Security, insurance, and affordability. That is the Greene message in the source. And it is a devastating populist indictment precisely because it is so concrete. Second, the farm and rural tribe. The source makes a big deal out of Greene reposting criticism of the White House's Only Farms meme and tying it to farmers being hit by tariff pain, fertilizer disruption, and the cascading economic effects of the war. This is important because farm voters are supposed to be emotionally safe territory for Trump. They are supposed to hear his nationalist posture and feel represented. But when war starts touching fertilizer logistics, export stress, and input costs, the symbolism flips. The war begins to sound like one more elite gamble whose costs are dumped on rural producers. Third, the anti-Epstein anti-corruption tribe. This is where the source gets especially volatile. Greene is not only criticizing the war, she is fusing the war betrayal with the Epstein betrayal. She says the administration protects Epstein, class pedos, and rapists. The source then brings in Benny Johnson attacking Pam Bondi over the mishandling of the Epstein files. This is a big deal because the Epstein obsession is not a side conspiracy in MAGA politics. It is part of the moral self, conception of a large section of the base. They believe they are at war with a decadent elite system that protects traffickers, predators, and insiders. Once that crowd starts feeling that Trump is protecting the same structure, war anger attaches itself to corruption anger. That produces a much deeper contamination. Fourth, the young male podcast and antiwar online tribe. The source highlights Greene contrasting boomers with millennials and Gen Z, saying younger generations want affordability, jobs, and an America-focused government, rather than more foreign wars that will send young people back into the machinery of empire. Then it gives examples from younger, right? Wing online spaces and adjacent spaces attacking war budgets, mocking the lack of domestic priorities, and openly calling the whole thing a scam against young Americans. This matters enormously because young male support for Trump was never based on traditional Republican discipline. It was based on vibes of disruption, anti-establishment masculinity, low trust in elites, and the belief that Trump would break the old forever war machine. If those voters now conclude he is simply repackaging that same machine, they do not need years to turn on him. They can detach emotionally in a week. And once they detach, they become loud. Fifth, the restrainer. Nationalist, national security tribe. The source brings in Megyn Kelly warning about losing people like Joe Kent and Tulsi Gabbard, and describing the restrainer wing of the Republican coalition as already deeply unhappy. This is very important because it means the anti-war reaction is not just grassroots noise. It is also occurring among figures connected to the national security argument Trump used to make. No more stupid wars. No more regime. Change fantasies. No more feeding the neocons. If that wing begins to see Trump as handing the neocons another gift, then one of the most coherent strategic justifications for Trumpism starts collapsing. 6. The Fox Faye boomers, Faye official, right tribe. Now this one is different. They are not breaking first, but the source shows Green trying to split them off from the younger and angrier parts of the coalition by labeling Fox fake news and accusing it of brainwashing boomers into supporting exactly what the movement had rejected. That is a very aggressive internal move. It means she is not merely attacking Trump. She is attacking the media discipline system that usually helps keep older conservatives aligned behind him. That is coalition warfare at a high level. She is trying to make loyalty itself look unserious. Now let us step back. Why is this especially dangerous? Because these tribes do not need to agree on everything. They only need to converge on one emotional conclusion. This is not what we voted for. The source repeats that phrase over and over in different forms. Green says it directly. The young male anti-war voices say it in economic language. The Epstein, focus voices say it in moral language. The restrainer voices say it in strategic language. Alex Jones says it in almost religious language. Arguing Trump needs intervention, prayer, and has somehow gone wrong. Different registers. Same conclusion. That is what coalition implosion looks like. It is not one clean ideological split. It is multi-directional estrangement. One wing says, you betrayed affordability. Another says you betrayed anti-war nationalism. Another says you betrayed the anti-pedo crusade. Another says you betrayed the young. Another says you betrayed the populist attack on the neocons. Another says you betrayed reality itself. And once all of those perceptions begin reinforcing each other, the leader at the center becomes much weaker than his headline polling alone might suggest. That is why I think the approval, drop line in the source, is less important than the emotional architecture underneath it. Polls can move around, but a coalition's emotional structure is harder to repair once several of its identity pillars start failing at once. The source is basically telling us that Trump is no longer just under pressure from outside enemies. He is losing the internal moral languages that once made his coalition coherent. That is a much deeper problem, because populist coalitions are held together less by policy spreadsheets than by shared enemies, shared mood, shared identity, and shared myth. Trump's myth depended on several things all being true at once. He was anti-war, he was anti-elite, he was anti-corruption, he was anti-fake news, he was pro-worker, he was pro-rural, he was the avenger of the forgotten American. The source shows Green and others, now taking each of those pieces and turning them against him. That is how myths implode, not with one contradiction, but with cascading contradictions that start touching every emotional anchor of the movement. This is why I think the midterm point matters too. Green says there is literally no scenario Republicans win the midterms if this continues. Whether that exact prediction proves right is not the important part. The important part is that she is trying to move the movement from moral disappointment to strategic desertion. She is saying not only that Trump betrayed you, but that staying with him now is politically suicidal. That is how defections become contagious. Now let me say something even sharper. Trump's usual defense systems are weak against this kind of attack. He can mock liberals. He can mock the press. He can call critics weak. He can paint establishment Republicans as losers. But how does he answer when MTG says America first means leave MAGA? How does he answer when the anti-Epstein crowd says he protects the very elites they hate? How does he answer when younger, right, wing men say the war is making life less affordable and more militarized? How does he answer when the restrainer wing says he is feeding the neocons? He has answers, of course, but they are much less potent here because the attack is coming from all the places he used to mine for authenticity. That is the trap. He is no longer only losing allies. He is losing mirrors. And when a populist leader loses the mirrors that reflected his own mythology back to him, the movement starts recognizing him as just another politician with power, excuses, and betrayal. That is a very dangerous moment. So if I had to reduce this whole source to one line, I would say it like this. Trump's Iran war is not just costing him support. It is triggering a simultaneous unraveling across the very subcultures that once made MAGA feel like a movement instead of just a campaign.